Almost everyone who filled out my audience analysis survey claimed to know someone with autism, but only about half claimed to be able to actually define autism itself. Similarly, not everyone actually knew the differences between autism and other similar disorders like ADHD or Asperger's, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I believe it is important to understand the people around us. This includes terms and diagnoses. Years of research, therapy, and my own diagnosis for autism under my belt has kept me up to date medical-wise, but this is not the same for everyone. Not everyone can say that, and that's okay. Today I would like to impart just one piece of information that will help us understand those around us. Asperger's and autism are often thrown around interchangeably, and for good reason. The defining characteristics of Asperger's and the defining characteristics of autism are almost identical. The DSM-4, published in 1994, identifies it via severe and sustained impairment in social interaction and the development of restrictive, repetitive behaviors, patterns of behaviors, interests, and activities that cause significant impairment. Autism today is defined as difficulty with social communications and social interactions and restricted, repetitive behaviors, interests, and activities. In short, almost word for word, Asperger's is autism. The definitions today are nearly identical. The differences, however, is where we run into trouble. Autism holds a stigma, one that many incurable disorders cannot shake. Autism makes people different. This stigma was much worse in the early 1900s when we were barely scratching the surface of what being autistic actually was, what mental health actually was, before we learned much about how to help each other. This is where Asperger's came in. Asperger's is often considered some form of weaker, less serious, or better, in some cases, than autism. When diagnosed, Asperger's often values unique skills, special abilities, and savants more than anything else. If you've noticed some weird language in what I'm saying, that's on purpose, and there's a good reason for it. That is because Asperger's, when Asperger's was defined, was diagnosed solely to separate autistic kids into groups based on worth. Dr. Asperger was a Nazi scientist, and he was one that seriously supported eugenics. He led large-scale centers where autistic and disabled children were studied and separated based on how functional they were. Basically, by meaning how they could communicate and if they had unique talents. These centers sent non-functional kids to other kill centers. Dr. Asperger often made the decision to separate these kids himself. Many active in the field today, including historical author and psychologist Edith Schaeffer, who I will be getting into more detail with, she's someone I reference a lot when it comes to this research, say that Dr. Asperger's horrible bias influenced most of his discoveries in the field. Schaeffer makes it clear that out of her extensive research into Dr. Asperger's documents, she found that he never honored his patients as human beings. In an interview hosted by NPR, Schaeffer explains that for a long time, Dr. Asperger was viewed as a hero. He was said to have rescued children from Nazis and worked to change the autism diagnosis from purely negative to instead something that argued for their value as unique individuals. This was not true. After reading upwards of 20 documents of Asperger's, Schaeffer said that she was appalled by what she found. He was complicit in eugenics based on disability. Asperger's worked with Nazis, not against them. His definitions were in line with Nazi ideology, and his practices reflected as such. Schaeffer was an early, loud voice against the name Asperger. The usage of it today often ignores his lack of medical ethics, serving only to separate autistic people from other autistic people. This history of Dr. Asperger is a large part of the reason that we don't diagnose Asperger's today. In the 2010s, the American Psychological Association reclassified Asperger's as underneath autism spectrum disorder, as a part of autism spectrum disorder. Autism is a spectrum with many treatments and support groups today, although it appears differently in different people. Many autistic people say that they find community and comfort in others with autism. Some people still use Asperger's in conversation, simply because it's a recognizable way to describe autism with minimal noticeable indicators, usually a way to describe an autistic person that communicates well. However, this is not true. This is not technically true in the medical world. Asperger's is no longer diagnosable in the United States. Outside of the United States, the World Health Organization still considers Asperger's a valid diagnosis, but there is a larger movement, a greater movement to change what we call autism today, to redefine it, to rework it. Autism itself is being reworked to better represent an actual spectrum without placing one side or abilities above another. These changes can be hard to keep up with, especially alongside many other changes in the medical world, like discoveries in modern medicine, discoveries in mental health, which is something that all of us can relate to. But what's most important overall, over knowing definitions, over knowing history and terms, is being supportive. It's being open-minded, being kind. It is important to be informed and to be educated. It is more important to come from a place of compassion and be ready to learn.